Welcome back to The Unbroken Place, where it begins and ends with empathy. I'm your host, Eddie Paul Thomas, and this week we have a very special guest. That would be Dr. Stephanie Romero. Stephanie is an educator and is also the executive director of a nonprofit named Awaken Pittsburgh. She brings more than 20 years of experience teaching elementary, middle school, high school, and college students, and now facilitates bringing mindfulness into business settings to help organizations better manage stress, reduce employee turnover, and improve overall mental health. She has been a meditator and mindfulness practitioner for more than 15 years, and I think she's an important first guest to a show like this that focuses on cultivating empathy. Stephanie's organization first caught my attention when I learned of their efforts to partner with school districts in Pittsburgh to help disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline with their Mindful Connections program for educators and classrooms. If you feel compelled to support Stephanie and Awaken Pittsburgh, please feel free to go to awakenpittsburgh.org/support after the show. Without further ado, grab some tea or coffee and take a listen. So I think everything will be fine either way. So, well, thank you for joining us here on the Unbroken Place podcast. Stephanie, you are someone who is well-versed in so many different things as it comes to mental health and mindfulness and meditation and the importance of including practices that help you better maintain your health. I'm just curious if you could, just on this topic that we're discussing today, which is addressing burnout and compassion fatigue among leaders, can you describe a moment where you realize the importance of mindfulness in addressing burnout and compassion fatigue among leaders?
Yeah, so I was teaching, actually. I was a K-12 teacher for many years and had a colleague who was also president of the union, the teachers union. So he had quite a position of power in our school, who was always angry, like just a very angry person. And I read something that was on burnout and compassion fatigue that basically said that anger could be a symptom of burnout and compassion fatigue, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about what compassion fatigue is, it's in the word, right? It's in the name of the thing. You have a tiredness because you've given so much compassion. So you've kind of drained yourself. And so things that might normally evoke compassion make you angry because you just feel like you're done, right? You're empty. And that's what I experienced with this man. And that's the same for burnout, right? So like you've just done it and done it and done it and given and given and given till you just don't have any more to give. And when we are trying to pour from that empty cup of ourself and there's nothing there to give, right? There's a frustration and it can come out as anger, right? Because you're so depleted. And so there was a big aha moment there for me when I realized that in teaching, those teachers sometimes that seem to lack compassion because they get angry easily, they don't extend themselves in the way you would hope, actually possibly what's underneath that, right? And this goes for this man who was in this leadership position, is that they've just given so much and haven't had the skill set to replenish.
Yeah. There's so much you said there, and I just think, along the lines of our educators, it's a career path that requires a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding, and you're not just dealing with students, you're dealing with parents and the politics of it all, and there's so much that goes into that. I'm curious. You mentioned anger, that you were witnessing from the leader of the school. What are some of the other common signs of burnout and compassion fatigue that leaders should be aware of, and not necessarily just in schools, but in larger B2B for-profit businesses as well?
Yeah, and I think in kind of extreme cases, it becomes a general sense of malaise, like just not feeling well, and it can be in the body, right?
Hmm.
So we are creatures that do something called somatize. So we like live in our body with our emotions, right?
Hmm.
And so
Right.
sometimes, if you think you get really stressed, you might get a stress headache or an upset stomach. Well, burnout can manifest as like fatigue, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
there's a mental fatigue, right? That's happening, like you just don't have that energy to do the thing. But that can also manifest in our bodies. And so when you see a lot of sick days, right? That could
Hmm.
be a leader's signal that something's not right. And that's not to say that everyone that takes a lot of sick days is experiencing burnout. That's of course not true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the reality is that when people are being nurtured and fed in their jobs and in their personal lives, we will experience as humans more energy to do the thing,
Yeah.
right? But when we feel depleted, and burnout is another version of depletion, right?
Hmm.
We've kind of reached our max. We just can't give any more, and we haven't done anything to take care of ourselves to recharge those batteries. Then that feeling of exhaustion, that feeling of being depleted, and then physical manifestations that go along with that, lethargy. It could
Hmm.
even manifest as like fuzzy thinking and ability to focus as well.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I am assuming too much, and I kind of pride myself on not assuming anything and asking lots of questions. And if I'm listening to this program for the first time, I'm hearing this term mindfulness, and it can lead you all over the place on the internet, in terms of what people think it is. But I'd love to draw on your expertise as someone who's done their dissertation on uh, this particular topic. I would love for you to break down for the people listening, what is mindfulness and what is the correlation with meditation?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So mindfulness is a quality we can develop. It is a quality of non-judgmental attention in the present moment. And that attention and awareness of our present moment could be our physical sensations, thinking that's going on, emotions that are happening, but it's also my awareness of you right now. So what's going on around me? So it's kind of a full 360 internal, external awareness in the moment without a judgment. And when I say
Mm-hmm.
without a judgment, I'm not talking about a moral judgment. I'm talking about the opposite of denial. So we do this wonderful thing as humans where something
Mm-hmm.
happens, we're like, nope, I'm going to pretend that's not real, right? But
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness is actually like, oh, that's there. That is
Yeah.
there, right? And so this non-judgmental quality, this openness, and even to curiosity about what is happening right now
Mm-hmm.
in my
Yeah.
present moment experience, including what's happening with you because I'm interacting with you, right?
Right.
So there's a
Right.
social, environmental kind of global awareness that comes to be part of this as well. And then, your question was, well, what about meditation? Well, meditation is a practice to grow our mindfulness.
Okay. Okay.
So when we meditate, often what we do is we have an object of awareness. Sometimes that's the breath. It could be a body sensation. And we rest our awareness or our attention on that object. And then, brains are made to think. So what's going to happen? You rest your brain on this thing. Let's say the
Right.
feeling of the breath in the body. And then next thing you know, you're making your grocery list, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Your mind's off
Yeah.
on something else, yesterday's news, whatever it is. And then you notice that and you're like, oh, yeah, not on the breath anymore. Bring it right back. And so you're building this quality of attention so that noticing when the mind has wandered, noticing when you've placed it. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's that gentle, curious, non judgmental bringing it back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I like to, and I just want to emphasize like that gentle quality is super important. That non-judgment is super important, because if we want to grow peace in our lives, if we beat up on ourselves, we're doing the opposite.
Gotcha. If you are hearing the little scratching on the doors, everyone, Stephanie has a beautiful set of pups that like to join us from time to time when we have our conversations. Got a dachshund. What are the other ones? You've got a dachshund and
I have a standard dachshund, a Chiweenie. Yeah. Chihuahua dachshund. I
Gotcha.
have a Pomeranian mix, and I have a Shih Tzu mix, and a cat. Can't the feline counts too.
Gotcha.
But
Oh, well, yeah.
he's not as noisy as the canine versions here.
That's all right. So I just wanted to set people up in case they hear anything later on. So if I'm hearing you, I'm curious to drill down a little bit more into what you were saying. In your experience, how does the practice of mindfulness help manage, the stressors that lead to burnout?
So, there's some kind of old saying that something like the first step in knowing that you have a problem is recognizing, or in fixing the problem is recognizing you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so that awareness is going to be the first thing. So the first thing to notice is like, what is actually happening? Is it burnout, right? Is it something else? And so first, acknowledging that's what it is, recognizing that's what it is. And then the next thing is, if you're already extremely burnt out, right, I would say just the mindfulness practice is probably not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to need to do a few more things than just start to meditate. However, what you do when you start to meditate is you pause, right? You start to take stock of what's present in your mind and your heart, and you start to notice your body sensations. So, for example, just give you this example. There was someone that I was working with that had foot pain. And as we grew in practice, he noticed that when he got stressed, he curled his toes under. Because he had been to the doctor and they couldn't find anything wrong with his feet. And that stress response was actually causing him pain because he was tightening and curling his toes under when he got stressed. But he wasn't aware of that. And so what we do once we start to notice what's going on is we can identify those pressure points. And that's a physical example, but I would say that that's a metaphor, right, for what's going on in our life. So where are those points in your work, in your personal life, where you're curling up, where you're tightening up, and you're causing yourself that pain? Now, I can't say what that is for everyone listening, but that's the idea, is that you then start to notice where those pain points are. And then you can start to say, oh, can I let that go? Yeah. Can I do something to release that? Can I shift that for myself somehow? And that's where the awareness practice becomes really important, and the non-judgment. Because now if this guy starts just, hammering himself, beating himself up for having been curling his toes in, then he's now got emotional violence he's doing to himself in addition to the physical pain. Right? So that's that non-judgment. Okay, this is what's been going on. Wow, now I see it. How can I work with it? And bring in some self-compassion, right, around what's going on. And so once you start to do that, the other thing that happens, with the practice, if you continue to meditate, continue to build your mindful awareness, you start to create a space in your reactivity. So, for example, we talked about anger as a symptom of burnout or compassion fatigue. The next thing that happens that could maybe trigger that anger, you'll have more of an ability to pause, notice that anger coming up, and then make a decision not to maybe lash out at that colleague or customer. Right? Because the practice of mindfulness then is going to give you a little bit of emotional freedom and choice. So that's the other kind of thing that happens. And that's not instant. It happens over time. But that gives you the opportunity to then kind of nurture yourself when oh, these are the situations that are actually causing me grief. What can
Yeah.
I do to provide some self-care or maybe shift my situation? Like if that's the thing that's making me crazy, if that's the thing that's really bothering me, can I advocate for myself to get more support in that situation? Something like
Yeah.
that. Hope that's making
I
sense.
love that. I think it's brilliant because you and I've talked before about my old college days and all the injuries from playing basketball, what that's done to my knees, my back, and other things. And like anything else, you mentioned the gentleman with uh, the feet that were balling up, the toes that were curling up. If left unattended, it can find its way into a much larger problem for people if they're not mindful of what or how their bodies are reacting in certain situations. So I can certainly see the value of mindfulness and leading into meditation that helps us grow in that mindfulness. Um, well, more specifically about the unbroken place, what we discuss here on a number of levels is empathy, and obviously, mindfulness has a great deal to do with empathy. And I'm just thinking about the uh, industry leaders, the managers, directors, what have you, um, and what you do. And I'm curious, how can leaders cultivate a culture of mindfulness, if you will, and empathy in their organizations to help prevent burnout?
Yeah, so I think as a leader, myself being a leader of an organization, perspective taking is
Mm-hmm.
the word that really stands out to me. So, before I decide what is best for you or what your schedule should look like or whatever decision is going to impact your life, can I take a moment and try to put myself in your shoes
Mm.
and see how whatever my decision is going to impact you? And if I can't do that, then there's that curiosity again. Let me ask, right? Before I hand down that decision. And so
Right.
that would be my own pause, my own mindful awareness is like, do I know? Am I sure? Am I clear, on what
Mm.
that is? But the ability to really just pause and try to take the perspective of the other person, like that is in a nutshell empathy.
Right.
I can feel what you feel. I can see what it's like for you, right? That's empathy. Now, we can't always do that because we're not mind readers, right? We can
Right.
imagine. And so, there's this wonderful man, he's deceased now, Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote Nonviolent Communication. And
Mm.
empathy is one of the key elements of nonviolent communication. And he basically says in his it's a technique and it's also so much more. He did conflict resolution in places like Rwanda after the Civil War there, right? So very
Right.
deep level of work and high level of work. And what he basically says is like, if you are not sure how that other person is feeling, if you can't empathize, or you're not sure you can empathize, ask, make a statement.
Right.
Is this making you feel angry? Is this making you feel happy? Is this making you feel scared? Whatever you would imagine that they're feeling, check it out with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so so there's a couple things happening here as a leader. Then I'm intentionally bringing in perspective taking and empathy, and I'm checking it out with the person and not making the assumption that I know what they think and feel,
Yeah.
right? Because I value empathy, because I value knowing how things are going to land for others. And that is a value, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
believe that human being's perspective, thoughts, feelings are worthwhile.
Yeah.
I can't teach someone that, right? That
Yeah.
has to come
Yeah.
from inside the leader. However, I will say in meditation and mindfulness practices, we do compassion growing practices. So if you are someone listening and just like, I just don't get that, I don't feel that, it has been studied that if you bring in compassion practices, you can grow your compassion.
Mm.
Right? So compassion is a muscle. It is not an inherent quality. Empathy is a
Right.
muscle. You can grow it. It is not an inherent quality. And that for me is like exciting because when we meet people who we think are not at all empathetic or compassionate, if they wanted to grow that, they can. We all can.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back in just a moment. People use dials anymore?
In today's fast-paced world, employers face a common challenge: employee stress, burnout, and turnover. Keeping your team motivated and productive when their stress levels are high is a constant struggle. But there is a solution. Introducing Awaken Pittsburgh's Mindful Connections for Workplace Wellness series. Our program helps reduce stress and burnout, fostering healthier, happier workplaces. Transform your workplace culture and unleash your team's full potential with Awaken Pittsburgh. Reach out today for more information through our website, awakenpittsburgh.org.
And we're back. That is so refreshing to hear. I've had several conversations with different individuals in different organizations, and you've heard it before that, oh, that's just how Steve is. And I don't know a Steve. I'm just making up a name. That's just how Steve or Mary are. That's who they are. And the fact of the matter is that they actually can grow in empathy and compassion and seeing beyond, the nose in front of them. And we're hearing it from a PhD, guys. So, this is, or not a PhD. I'm sorry. That is incorrect. You're a doctorate, not PhD, correct?
Yeah, EDD, doctorate in education.
Perfect. Thank you.
Philosophy.
So, but yeah, it's so wonderful to hear that indeed, if somebody wanted to change, they could. And I know that, some of the resources that we provide, I've got a newsletter on LinkedIn and a blog on my site called Okay on Second Thought. And it's all about empathy and slowing down and finding ways to connect with each other. And I'm curious, coming from you and your experience, what kind of mindfulness practices would you recommend for someone who's just kind of getting started on this mindfulness and meditation journey, particularly for those in leadership positions?
Yeah, I mean, and this is something you can do, as a team, right? So you don't have to do this on your own. But like I would say, an individual practice is super important. But you had asked before how to bring it into the culture of the organization. So at Awaken, when we have meetings for the board or, deliver meetings, committee meetings, really almost always we start with just a couple minutes of practice. And that's really simple. And I'll just give you an example. So I have a chime with me. I always have one on my desk. And so let's just listen to the chime for a minute. And you can have the expectation that everyone will come in, put down their phones, close their computers for just that minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ring your chime and everyone just pause and just notice what's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind. What are you bringing? What are you bringing into this meeting right now, right? Yeah. And sometimes noticing what I'm bringing into the meeting, I might notice, I'm really nervous about this meeting, or boy, I really didn't want to be here. Or there's a thing that happened at home that I'm ruminating on, so whatever it is. And then sometimes at our meetings, the invitation is, whatever you're bringing, can you put pause on it? Mm-hmm. Because it's still going to be there at the end of the meeting so that we can give our full attention to whatever it is we're going to do right now together. Right? Yeah. So just as an example, then that's a mindfulness practice, right? And it doesn't take more than a minute or two. And I would suggest that minute or two will change the tone of your meetings, will change the quality of sharing and attention that people are able to bring. And then the other personal practice that I would say brings compassion is called Just Like Me. And so take that person that gives you the most grief. Take that
Mm-hmm.
person that you don't have patience with. Take that person that just irritates you. We have all had that
Right.
person at work,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
there was a particular teacher that used to just like you would be at the copy machine and she would walk in front of you. Sorry, I have to get this copy now. I'm like, hello, you know,
Right.
you're like
Right.
we're doing the same job. We have the same time. I don't understand why you want to step in front of me. So, what I would do is actually this practice with her, and it's a humanizing practice, because what tends to happen is when someone irritates us, we find someone that we dislike for whatever reason. And this is so true about politics. We like dehumanize the other side, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so, how do we rehumanize them and bring in the empathy and compassion? In this practice, you just say to yourself things like, just like me, that person wants to be happy.
Yeah.
Just like me, that person wants to be loved. Just like me, that person, fill in the blank, right?
Right.
And you could just think of 4 or 5, and you can, Google search this. Just like me practices are out there a
Mm-hmm.
lot, but come up with 4 or 5 sentences about what it means to be human, right?
Right.
To want to feel connection, to want to have joy, to want to have peace, whatever. And then, the bottom, the ending for me at the end of that practice, I usually do, they're just trying to get their needs met.
Right. Right.
And back
Which
to
is
Marshall Rosenberg,
Mhm.
he has a quote, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but I'll paraphrase it for you. That think of that worst action, that most annoying thing that person does. It's a
Mhm.
tragic attempt to get a need met.
Mm.
Right? It is just
Yeah.
like you think of the worst thing someone has done. It is a tragic attempt to get a need met. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the empathy. That's the compassion.
Yeah. So there's so many levels that we could connect on in terms of the personal level, for individuals, and we'd probably spend 3 hours on this podcast if we were to do so. But I'm curious, in the newsletter that I spoke of earlier, we, to convince some colleagues of ways to incorporate empathy into their workplace, we utilize data. We utilize a lot of statistics and stories, longitudinal studies, say, hey, more empathy in the office, can lead to higher retention rates, employee satisfaction, customer service goes up, things of that sort. So I'm curious, when you're talking about mindfulness and what you do at Awaken Pittsburgh, what advice would you give to those leaders who are skeptical about finding out the benefits of mindfulness and empathy in their professional lives?
Well, when we do programs to build mindfulness in organizations, what we see is that the stress levels go down, the burnout levels go down, compassion fatigue goes down. And there's a survey that we use that's called the Professional Quality of Life that measures burnout, compassion fatigue, and a third variable that's called compassion satisfaction. So,
Mm-hmm.
especially people who are in service organizations, how satisfied are they in the work that they do, especially when it's helping, teaching, serving others, right? So that's the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of burnout, that what you're doing is
Right.
feeding you, right?
Right.
And we see
Right.
that grows when they have practices that sustain them, that allow them to pause, when they build in self-care, all of the things that we know we need for balanced mental health, right? And well-being. When we're doing those things, our stress level goes down, burnout goes down, compassion fatigue goes down, and our satisfaction in helping and serving others goes up.
Mm. Amazing.
Yeah.
I think for me, because there's so much more people could learn, and guys who are listening, gals who are listening, one of the best ways to learn about the things that Stephanie and the team are doing at Awaken Pittsburgh is to jump right on to awakenpittsburgh.org and see how they serve not only individuals, but also organizations, especially if you're in some sort of fast-paced environment. You find it hard to to keep people in their seats to do the job. You've got people who are sick or leaving to find other jobs. There's some stressful environments out there, and what they offer really, really does change entire environments. And quite frankly, if you're looking at from a business leader aspect, you're also looking at the bottom line. How does it impact your bottom line? You're not spending thousands and thousands of dollars to find, someone to replace someone who just left. I'm curious. I was looking at one of the partnerships that you had, Stephanie, just to kind of show them what you do and how you partner. You worked with University of Pittsburgh's Center for Mindfulness and Consciousness to address some of the burnout among leaders. Could you unpack a little bit of that for everyone, that work that you did?
Yeah, so I was a grad student at University of Pittsburgh and transitioned into a research position just at the start of Awaken Pittsburgh. And there were a group of faculty there that had this idea to start the Center for Mindfulness and Consciousness Studies there. And I supported that work. I thought it was a great idea. And so we wrote a white paper that, might be floating out there somewhere, that we presented to the provost as an argument for why this center should be started. So I was in that group that helped to kind of kick it off, right? And the provost funded it and helped create the center. There was a faculty member who was in public health who was the main driving force behind it, but I was one of the folks that contributed to that work. And then we started meeting regularly, and we really decided that just having a space, and University of Pittsburgh's huge organization, right? But having a space to come together in practice on campus as researchers, as scholars, as chairs of departments, whoever these folks were, professors, a bunch of different people, and share our practice, but also our research, our understanding, all of that. So we would get together on a monthly basis and we would just support one another. We would practice together, and then we would just kind of share what we were doing. And so it was really helpful in support of each other's research and all of those things. And then what came out of that is there started to be an annual day of mindfulness that started to be offered to the community. And that's where we engaged with other local businesses and other partners to start to share and bridge the gap between what was happening at the university in research and understanding with the community. And so then researchers could give presentations and people could attend it. Now, the unfortunate thing is that center is not really fully functioning anymore. We won't get into all those reasons, but this idea of like, how do we bridge the gap? And I think, me getting out and talking to people and sharing is one of the ways between people's understanding and doing in organizations and the research institutions and what their understandings are.
Yeah. Nice. Well, just a final question for you, Stephanie. What message do you hope leaders take away from our time together today about the power of mindfulness and empathy in overcoming burnout and compassion fatigue?
Well, I would say the biggest message for leaders to understand is, well, there's two things. I won't just say one. The first one is connection, right?
Yeah.
That when we as leaders can be empathetic, we can build connections with the people that we supervise, that we work with, and all of that. And what we all really want as human beings is connection, right? Yeah. We all really want that. And empathy is the bridge, right? Empathy is the bridge that makes the connections with others. I have witnessed that when someone feels connected to a leader in an organization, they will go that extra mile.
Yes.
When they don't feel connected, you can't get them to do what they're supposed to do as opposed to
Right.
going the extra mile, right? Sometimes.
Right.
So, it's self-serving, but, and I will warn you, like, it has to be genuine because people will sniff out a fake, right? But
Yeah.
if you can foster that environment of empathy and compassion,
Hmm.
you can definitely build connection with the people that work with you, and that will build relationship and loyalty to your organization and to you, right? And
Yeah.
it motivates people when they feel connection in that way. And then in terms of burnout and compassion fatigue, the flip of that is once you are connected to those that work with you, you are going to notice when things are not right. And hopefully, because you do feel compassion and empathy, be able to support them in shifting something before it gets to the point where they're totally burnt out, right?
Right. Right.
Because that's the other awareness piece, right? Like if I'm in relationship with you, Eddie, I'm going to notice something is not right with Eddie. I'm going to
Yeah.
feel it, right? Because I am in
Yeah.
relationship with you. And when I notice that, because I feel it, because I'm empathetic, I'm going to want to talk to you about it and troubleshoot it with you and try to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of those, and I've had some really, really in tune leaders of the organization before that I really just adored. And one of the coolest things is figuring out that those who are really in tune with empathy and compassion oftentimes can pick up that something's off before I did. And it allows me to explore what is going on with me, what's really on my mind and heart that's slowing me down or forcing me to lose focus. So yeah, I think what you said was spot on. So well, Stephanie, I thank you so much for your time, for being on the Unbroken Place with me and all the listeners. I wanted to let people know that Stephanie also has her own podcast, which is amazing. It's called The Ripple Effect. Of course, The Ripple Effect with Stephanie Romero. It is on every platform you could possibly think of. So take a listen. She's got some really insightful people on there who are sharing all kinds of ways in which we can grow in mindfulness and really have a positive impact on the world. So Stephanie, also make sure, if you didn't hear it before, you can check out her work at awakenpittsburgh.org. Is there anything else that I can think of? Anything else coming up? Things that you might want to invite people to?
Well, we are always offering open meditations. So regardless of when people are listening to this, you can find us on Eventbrite or on our calendar on our website and just join an open sit if you're interested in trying meditation out. And we always have open offerings of classes if you really want to take a deeper dive. So, and if you're looking for something for your organization, just, fill out our contact sheet and I'd be happy to have a chat and talk about how to bring more compassion and shift culture in your org. And thanks for having me, Eddie. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.
The Unbroken Place podcast is presented by Elevate One Consulting. The show was produced by Say Something Studios. Learn more about both of these in the show notes. The show's music is performed by Little Glass Men and Captive Portal. We want to thank you for being a part of the Unbroken Place community. Look for an ongoing conversation on Instagram and Facebook at the handle @UnbrokenPlace. You can also find some helpful resources at eddiepaulthomas.com. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter called OK on Second Thought on LinkedIn. Until next time, one love.
In a world where thriving teams, engaged managers, and ethical leaders are the backbone of successful business, how do entrepreneurs set the stage for human flourishing while scaling up? The answer is ongoing effort, leadership, and intentional communication. At Elevate One Consulting, Dr. Erica Garcia Thomas and Eddie Paul Thomas are helping to turn the tide. With a blend of evidence-based practices, interactive teaching, and dynamic public speaking, they're not just consultants, but revolutionaries in improving company health, growth results, and employee engagement. Specializing in revitalizing brands, coaching leaders, and accelerating projects, Elevate One Consulting offers a comprehensive suite of business services designed to enhance team leadership and customer experience. Whether advising executives, guiding digital marketing strategies, or transforming organizational culture, they're here to elevate your business to the next level. Don't settle for a business that survives. Ensure that it thrives. Visit www.elevateoneconsulting.com. ELEVATE 1consulting.com today and take the first step towards creating an environment where everyone flourishes. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate.
Say Something Studios.